We're over 250 people registered, but we're well aware that some of the CCSD teachers who are registered are teaching today. Because of the past year, there's a lot of people who are teaching summer school, and we've made arrangements so that all of the sessions, with one or two exceptions, are going to be recorded, and they'll be posted hopefully every night on Dr. Bickmore's YouTube channel. We have made a session for, we have a playlist that'll be for general sessions. We have a playlist that'll be for each concurrent session. So if you wanted to watch something from concurrent session 3, you would go to that playlist and you'd be able to watch it. So that's there. Now, a few Zoom announcements. We would really prefer that you put your Zoom name as the name that you registered with, so that we can track people who have registered, and that we don't want to have any problems. If somebody is Romper Room 28 here to cause trouble, we've given the Zoom host permission to exit those people from the room. So we would like people to use their names. Last year we had a flawless summit through Zoom. Even though we were new and didn't quite know what we're doing, it worked very well, but we're prepared to do that. And the best way for us to verify is for people to use the names they registered. Also, for bandwidth concerns and other things, we hope that if you're in a general session, it's probably better to stay muted, and when at all possible, if you're not part of what's going to happen in that general session, to also put your camera muted as well, so that we can do the bandwidth issues. Please tweet as actively as possible. The hashtag is capital YAS Summit, SUMMIT 2021. It's on the program. And Sarah, you might want to even take the Google link and put it in the chat again for the program if people don't have it, so that we've got that going. So those are some basic things. It's my pleasure to introduce you to UNLV, and we're so happy to be hosting this. And the number of scholars and teachers from a variety of universities just makes us happy to know that we're a place that can host so many people that are interested in bringing reading to the lives of young people. As part of that, and as many of you know, the last year has been fraught with all kinds of anxiety, from health issues to societal issues and concerns for the welfare and the well-being of other people. As part of that, I'm going to share my screen because there's something from UNLV that I would like to share. It's about 1.5 minutes. So I'm going to share my screen and let my screen do the talking for a minute as part of the introduction to UNLV.
The University of Nevada, Las Vegas wishes to acknowledge and honor the indigenous The University of Nevada, Las Vegas wishes to acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities of this region and recognize that the university is situated on the traditional homelands of the Nuwuvi Southern Paiute people. We offer gratitude for the land itself, for those who have been stewarding it for generations, and for the opportunity to study, learn, work, and be in community with this land. We encourage everyone in the UNLV community to engage in continued learning about the indigenous peoples who work and live on this land since time immemorial, including the Las Vegas Paiute tribe and the Mawapa Band of Paiutes, and about the historical and present realities of colonialism. As one of the most diverse universities in the United States, UNLV believes it is important to recognize and appreciate the use of Southern Paiute land as part of its mission to be a welcoming and inclusive place for working and learning.
Thank you. As we consider what we're doing and what we're talking about in all the sessions today, I think it's important that we remember that we are doing our very best as teachers and educators to represent authentically the lives of all the people that we work with and the people we teach, both the students in the classroom, but their parents and the communities in which they're in. So I think that's important to think about as we go forward. And as you'll see, many of the sessions represent some of these diverse ideas and challenges that we face as we go through the day. Also, we were very intentional about the authors we included. We believe that the authors we've included in these 3 days represent a variety of diverse populations and identities and positionalities throughout our community and our country. It's also my pleasure now to introduce Interim Dean Danica Hayes, who will also greet you. So Danica, to you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Summit on the Research and Teaching of Young Adult Literature. As Steve said, I'm Danica Hayes, and I'm Interim Dean of UNLV's College of Education. While we wish that this year's gathering could be in person, we're delighted that the online format affords us this opportunity to reach so many who otherwise would not have been able to participate. I'd like to recognize and thank the co-directors of this year's program for their dedication to ensuring that this year's conference came to fruition. And I have no doubt that this year's conference, like last, will be flawless. In addition to Dr. Steve Bickmore from UNLV College of Education, I'd like to thank Dr. Sarah Donovan, Assistant Professor from Oklahoma State University, and Gretchen Rumer, Professor and English Department Chair from McGuinness College. I'd also like to thank Sarah and Oklahoma State University for hosting and sponsoring author K.A. Holt and the Monday panel of debut authors featured this year. I'd like to give a special welcome to all the middle and high school teachers and librarians from Clark County School District here in Southern Nevada, and thank our CCSD partners, Amy Raymer and Barbara Lindsay, for securing funds to reimburse those attendees for their conference fees. And for those that are joining us a little bit later in terms of CCSD, because you're doing the hard work of teaching, thank you for watching this. This year's conference was enhanced by the contributions of Dr. Sophie Ladd, who's been instrumental in the development of the Children's Literacy Strand, and Dr. Kenny Varner, who's director of the Gail A. Zeter Literacy Center at UNLV. This year's theme, amplifying and affirming joy and humanity in readers' hearts and minds, could not have come at a better time. Young people are beginning more in-person interactions. And these opportunities underscore the human connections that serve as bridges connecting us across our differences. These bridges create empathy and celebrate diversity in all of its forms. Literature focusing on these precepts in today's education settings is critical in the development of the next generation of world citizens. So thank you for taking the time to join the summit. I look forward to the next few days, and I'm sure the outstanding lineup will prove engaging and enlightening. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Interim Dean Hayes. That's hard to say. In July 1st, we can change that, right?
Yes.
So that's great. Thank you, Danica, for spending some time with us this morning. And we're certainly excited to be part of this college and this department and the great work that's going on here by so many of my colleagues and people in the community. Now we're going to have a special announcement about CCSD, because we're very attuned that we have some issues that we want to make sure that those of you that qualify can be reimbursed. So all CCSD teachers and librarians, and we'll do this more than once, right, Amy? So Amy's nodding her head. Please email Dr. Raymer, and I'm going to put her email in the chat right now as we're talking so that you can take it and email her. Let's make sure we get it to everyone that's there. So make sure that Amy has that. To request the required paperwork for reimbursement. Attendance is required for the Saturday sessions in order to receive the reimbursements and CEUs for attending the summit. Now, that's important, and we hope that you attend when you can on Thursday and Friday. And as we mentioned before, the sessions will be recorded. But in order to qualify for that reimbursement, you need to have verification that you're attending the Saturday sessions. So that's where we are. I wish that I was more competent about this, but it's young adult literature is a pretty tight community. And if you start going to NCTE and the Allen Workshop or some of those things, you'll find that the publishers and the authors are really people who want to know their readers, and they want to know the people that they're providing for. And in one of the meetings that I had last night, one of my colleagues for a long time reminded me that we should probably acknowledge something that has happened. Some of you, this will mean absolutely nothing, but Richard Robinson, who was the longtime CEO of Scholastic, died this year at 84, and he's a gap in the lives of many authors. For some of you, it will mean more if I tell you that he's the reason that Harry Potter arrived in America. Scholastic, Harry Potter, as some of you know, had shaky beginnings. A lot of people didn't want to buy it, didn't want to take it. And Scholastic really bet the farm on Harry Potter. So that's one of the things. But as if you're in Jeff Kaplan's sessions later on or one of the others, you'll find that he would come to sessions and wander around at NCTE and other places just to make sure that people were having a good time. And he continued to do that and be a presence in the Scholastic family until he just recently passed. And if you are following any authors on Facebook that are connected with that, you'll see that. I mentioned that in part because there are other people, the publishing world, which is largely set in New York. If you were to talk with any publishing house, many of them have lost important people in their families and their professional families this last year. It's happened not only Scholastic, but HarperCollins and Penguin and others. So it's worth mentioning that as we go forward. So I wanted to mention that and take a moment that you might want to read the obituary that you can find online of Richard Robinson in many places, and maybe we'll add one of those to the chat as we're going along here. Well, once again, I'm going to look at how many people are here now. Well, we have 111 people, so that's getting to be quite a few as we go through here. As this gets started, I personally want to thank both Sarah Donovan and Gretchen Rumer for the outstanding help they've been as co-directors. And truly, while I end up being the face or the email of a lot of this, much of what's happening and maybe most of what's happening has happened under the guidance and advice of people who have functioned as the co-directors, and people who volunteered to chair sessions, and people who volunteered to be the technical Zoom hosts for this. So we have a lot of people to thank, but my gratitude is deeply felt for both Sarah and Gretchen and the help and the advice that they've provided through this and through this whole endeavor. Well, now I'm going to break and take a deep breath, and I'm going to pause, and I'm going to try to talk from my heart a little bit about young adult literature for a few minutes. I'm not sure when I really became a reader. I don't remember as a child never being able to read. I just could read. I could read about the Purple Dragon. I could read any book that I wanted, whether it was Dr. Seuss. I just could read. Going to school didn't mean anything for me in terms of reading. I got it. I could follow Tip around the pages, and I could follow Spot or whoever it was. It didn't matter. But I can remember being enamored with stories and reading a book and running into my mother and retelling her the book, and following her around as she was doing her task and reading those books. And always throughout my life, as we moved a lot, I remember finding my first friend at a library. And the friend didn't talk back. The friend was usually a book. I can remember when I moved back to Las Vegas in the 8th grade, I wandered across Decatur into the shopping center, past Fletcher Jones Chevrolet, and there was a little branch library there. And I wandered in and found a book called Sackett's Brand. And I checked it out. And it fit in my back pocket because it was a paperback. And I became lost in the world of Louis L'Amour Westerns for a long time. And shortly after that, of course, I made friends here, and I see Cheryl here, who's a friend, was a friend then, and her brothers, Gary and David, were part of the group that we hang around with. But Louis L'Amour's characters were a constant for me. They were a place where I could go for refuge. They were a place where I could imagine different worlds that I could conquer, that I could take part in. I was reading so many Louis L'Amour Westerns that my father, unbeknownst to me, asked my mother if she'd read a couple to see what the heck I was reading. Because if I was reading so many Westerns, they certainly couldn't be just Westerns, you know. And so my mother read one and she says, they're just Westerns, right? My dad said, oh, well, okay. So I didn't get a talk or anything. I didn't know that for years until when my father began to retire and lo and behold, turned into a reader of Louis L'Amour. And I tried to teach him about A.B. Guthrie, and I tried to teach him about Owen Wister and other Western writers, but he could never be convinced that Luke Short or any of the others were quite as good as Louis L'Amour. I never had to buy another one because whenever I visited my father, any book by Louis L'Amour that I wanted to revisit, he had on his shelf, and I could do that. And it became a way in which, when he was older and I was older, that we could share common experiences and common feelings about that. When I became a teacher, I wanted to share more than anything else my love of reading with students. I realized I first had grand notions that I was going to be some kind of sage on the stage that was going to wow people into reading whatever I thought was the most important thing. And then as my wife reminded me when she was a middle school principal, when she was interviewing people to hire, she wanted to hear one thing. She didn't want to hear if they mastered their content area. She wanted to hear if they were concerned about the growth of students. And somewhere in my early career, I realized that I was more concerned with the growth of students than I was with what content I was teaching. And if they became more passionate about the things I was passionate, that was a step in the right direction. I remember as a high school senior, I took a class called The Novel. You know, really intriguing. It was a perfect class for me because I got to read the novel, and Mr. Smith really had a class called The Novel so that he could do the yearbook. And he had a bunch of readers in there and he didn't have to worry about us. He assigned us a book and we read, and he did yearbook stuff. Near the end of the semester, he assigned us to read Crime and Punishment. And I read Crime and Punishment knowing for the first time in my life, I'd read the most important thing that I'd ever read. I don't know why it was important, but I knew that there was something either wrong with me or right with me if I could empathize with the double axe murderer. I had to figure that out. I think, why am I concerned about Raskolnikov? Why is that happening to me? And I read the book with great intrigue and kept reading it for several years. It was probably the most significant book I ever read before I decided to become an English major. And I read it again when I was in college. I read it after college, and I read it when I was teaching AP Literature. And I assigned it one year, near the end of the year, and I told students, I don't know why I love this book, because it's disturbing. And I'm really not quite sure why I'm teaching it, except that I feel like this is a class that can take a challenge. And they read the challenge. Now, I'm not sure how successful it was for everyone, but Brett Crockett contacted me about 10 years after his graduation, and he's an attorney in Salt Lake City now, and he says, Bickmore, they all call me Bickmore. I was never Mr. or Doctor, just Bickmore, right? He said, I want you to know I've been reading Crime and Punishment every year since I was a senior in high school. He says, I'm not sure why, except it helps me keep thinking about the human condition and whether or not we can save ourselves. Well, that was an important moment for me as a teacher. I've had others, and most of you that are teachers have had others as well. But I'm convinced they don't save them and they don't find them unless they know that we also care about the things we read. I can tell you today that as you go through the next 3 days, I hope that you have a journey with You Bring the Distance Near from Macaulay Perkins like I've had. I hope that you read with the same depth of conviction and love The Skin I'm In by Sharon Flake, and that you find a way to have heartfelt empathy for the kid that's being bullied from no fault of their own, but simply for the way they appear to someone else. I hope that you can read a book like Read Between the Lines by Joe Knowles and rethink how many times you either flipped the bird at somebody or wanted to flip the bird at somebody, and realize maybe now you're a little bit more grown up and might refrain from that. That's one of the great joys of reading that book, is I had a chance to reflect on my own miscomings and recalibrate how I responded to people in moments of crisis or sadness or pain, or maybe joy. I'm forever grateful for somebody who directed me to Wrecked by Maria Patti, and I often call Wrecked Speak Goes to College. And as much as I love Lori's book Speak, I think Wrecked meant more to me because I was more empathetic with the women in my life when I reached college than I probably was when I was in high school. And I felt some of the pain and tragedy as a bystander that Maria so calculatedly gives us. I hope also that as we invited Carrie here, who's the author of Redwood and Ponytail, I assigned, I don't say accidentally, but it was on a reading list. And in college, you don't have students stay after in groups the same way that they do in high school. But a couple of years ago, 3 kids kind of hesitantly came to the top of the classroom at the end of a college YA class holding Carrie's book and said, "This is the book I needed when I was in middle school." I don't feel the pain and empathy of kids in the LGBT community. That's hard for me. I empathize with them, but I haven't felt it. I haven't had family members that have experienced it in close ways. But listening to those 3 kids, juniors in college, say that they needed that book when they were in middle school, helped me realize, once again, the importance of having as many books as possible on your shelves, and that maybe what you teach is not as important as what you provide. And so I remember that. I'll tell you one more brief story, and it's nice that Ellen is last. When I was first teaching one of my very first young adult lit classes and read the syllabus, a young junior in college ran up to class, and I think she had a copy of Crank in her hand, and she said, "Why isn't Ellen Hopkins on the reading list?" And I, 2004, 2005, I said, "Well, I'm not really sure who Ellen Hopkins is. I had never read an Ellen Hopkins book. I'd seen them. They were too fat for me. I was too dumb to open them up and realize that they were verse, you know. And she said, she's the most important people writing for adolescents in the world today. And here's Lacey telling me this, says, the sophomore says, well, I'll look into that, Lacey. And certainly for your free choice, you can choose that. Well, I'm happy to say that I've never not talked about Ellen Hopkins in a young adult literature class since then, because her books speak in resounding ways to people. Librarians can probably attest that she tends to be the frequently most stole author in a library. You're probably replacing her books all the time because people take an Ellen Hopkins book and they don't bring them back. And I'm convinced they're passed among their friends and they're reading in ways. So the power of literature to change our hearts and minds is real. The power of literature to help us understand where we position ourselves in the world is real. I hope that you take the time to joy in what we're offering and that you expand your shelves, that you grow the opportunities for your students to read more widely in the world. And that's my invitation to you. And I hope that I've succeeded Chris Crutcher's expectations, because he expects me to shed a tear or two whenever I speak publicly. So any of you that know him can report that one or two dropped out as I was trying to do this. So thank you very much for being here. And we're gonna transition pretty quickly to that. So I'm not sure, Sarah, Gretchen, if I'm missing any other announcements. Amy, I think we've covered so far and we'll make more as we go. We're gonna transition to this one. I think Susan is here. In my screen, I don't see Matali, but I'm confident that she's here.